The New York Mets already took their first series of the season against the Phillies, winning each of these first two games. Mark Canha with the big offensive day, 4 RBIs, and Carlos Carrasco, his second great start in a row on the show today. I'll discuss how the Mets rotation is finally starting to be solidified, getting these starts from Kodai, Senga, and Carrasco. And then I want to look at Mark Canha. Does he deserve more playing time from Tommy Pham? We're going to discuss that on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And the Mets were able to win their series against the Phillies thanks to good starting pitching. We're going to go and open things up there because this season, when the Mets have gotten 6 innings from their starters, they're 15-0. That's a pretty good recipe for success. The Mets have only won 29 games this year. So you look at that breakdown, 15 of those wins have come when you got a good start. So as much as the offense is probably discussed a little bit more because you're always looking at a Mark Vientos not in the lineup, and you see Daniel Vogel back, and he gets walks. Tonight, those walks worked out, but at times you're wondering about, is he giving you enough from a DH? And there's all of these conversations that can be had day in, day out with an evolving lineup. But the heart of everything, I have continued to harp on the fact that the Mets struggles always started and really ended with the rotation. And if you got a competent rotation, you were going places. Because last year, the reason why the Mets won 101 games, as much as it was due to the great seasons from Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor and Jeff McNeil and Brandon Nimmo and Starling Marte, if it wasn't for Chris Bassett having a great year, Carlos Carrasco having a really solid season, Taijuan Walker having a great year, when you got Scherzer and DeGrom, they were both elite in the regular season. If it wasn't for all those things, you wouldn't have won 101 games. And what's going to put the Mets back in position to contend for this division is getting that level of starting pitching. And when you see Kodai Senga look like a frontline guy, and then Carlos Carrasco follows up what was already a really good start his last time out with 6 strong innings again, there's the recipe you're looking for moving forward. And for Carrasco, all he allowed was a home run to Edmundo Sosa. That was the only damage that he really suffered in this game. 6 innings pitched, 6 hits allowed, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts. He looked really solid. And there was never really an inning where things seemed to be spiraling on him, where he was not in command. It seemed like he really had kind of his finger on the pulse of the game the entire time. And I think that's something with Carrasco that's been pretty evident throughout his tenure with the Mets. I mean, 2021, he just never had it. But when we saw him last year, you pretty much knew in the first couple innings if it was going to be a good Carrasco starter or a bad one. And I'm sure that's still going to be the case this year. He might go out next time and walk a couple guys in the first inning, and there might be a bases loaded jam, and you might be thinking, oh, this is going to go sideways, and it probably will. Like his first start coming off rehab, where he or off the injured list, where he gave up those runs early against the Guardians, but then found a way to solidify himself, but the damage was done. When Cookie looks like he did today, and he's maybe giving up a hit an inning, but he's working around it. First inning, it's a hit to Bryce Harper. It's going to happen a lot. Harper's a great hitter, but he worked around it. Gives up a double to Brandon Marsh in the second inning, but again, works around that. The home run to Sosa, then gives up a hit to Bryson Stott, but gets some ground balls, gets a strikeout on Harper, finds his way through that inning, no problem. Fourth inning, 1, 2, 3. Fifth inning, gets a double play to retire the side in order. And then the sixth inning, he did have that one instance where I think there was a little bit of doubt from the Mets. Could he maybe lose it in this game? He gave up the hit to Harper. He walked Kyle Schwarber and, put two runners on base, but he got the big out he needed to get out of the inning. And the Mets, clinging to the lead that they had, they decided, what? We're turning this over to the bullpen. They went to Raley. They went to Ottavino and Robertson, and they shut the door and they made sure they got the series. And that's something that we've seen Buck Showalter do in the past. Could they have maybe push Carrasco for a seventh inning? Potentially, but they didn't need to. They had a game in hand and they made sure of it. So I was really happy with the pitching in this game. And then obviously we can't talk about a game where Mark Canha drove in every single run without mentioning what he did in this one. And look, the Mets were going up against a tough pitcher in Aaron Nola, who has been really suffering for some bad luck this year. You look at the innings he's eaten and the way he's pitched and the 4.70 ERA he's dealing with right now, and it's been a rough go for him. Mets only had 5 hits in this game, but you got the right hits and from Mark Canha, the timely hits that you needed. Last year, sometimes we saw that from the Mets. It was just getting the hit at the right time. And after Carrasco gives up a run in that third inning, bottom of the third, the Mets grab a lead. Daniel Vogelbach gets a walk. Was it on 4 pitches? It was on 4 pitches. It's funny because it's all about his eye. And in that at bat, it's just they threw him nothing to hit. And then Mark Canha comes up and hits his 4th home run of the season, and it was huge for him. He got kind of a hanging cutter that was center cut, up in the zone, and put a good swing on it, and he drove it out of the ballpark. And I think Canha really needed that. Really needed this game. It hopefully is a turning point for him. I'd like to see him get back out there to close out this series, start this final game and see if he can build some momentum off of it. But that was really a big moment for him to get that homer. And then I think it carried over into his next at bat in the following inning where the Mets had a rally. Pete Alonso got a hit. Brett Beatty drew a walk. McNeil had led things off with the flyout. Starling Marte ends up striking out. So it's a 2-out situation with 2 runners on, and none other than Daniel Vogelbach again drawing a walk. That one was a 4-pitch walk again. So Nola, for whatever reason, did not want to attack Vogelbach, and he kept the bat on his shoulder and was able to get on base. And then Mark Canha, once again, for whatever reason, Nola would rather face the guy that he gave up a home run to than Vogelbach, and the Mets will take that one. He fell behind 0-2 in that count, spit on a pitch that Nola was trying to get him to chase, and then an elevated sinker up in the zone. He gets on top of it and punches it into the outfield, and 2 runs come across, and he smacks his own ass as he has been known to do now, and has a 4-RBI day. So big outing for Canha to be able to put up all those runs and to go home feeling good about himself. Kind of shocking to see that the OPS is at 710 on the season. It's actually a little better than I actually thought. And in the final segment today, what I want to do is really explore the numbers behind Canha and Pham this year, and who should be getting the playing time moving forward, because it feels like they're in kind of a dead split right now. And I don't know if that's necessarily great for either of them. So I want to go through all that, but I also, in the next segment here, want to discuss this starting rotation, because again, the biggest takeaway is Carlos Carrasco looks good, and that is a massive thing for this team moving forward. So we're going to get to that in just a minute. Before we do, though, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever been in the situation where you're stressed out trying to find tickets to the game, and you just decide to bag it because you just can't find a deal that works for you? Game Time is there to change that. It's a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you, with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, so you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hype for all the fun you're going to have at the game. The Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time is going to credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. One of them is that it's really easy and you get images of your seats before you buy. So you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, you're all set. And then the tickets are sent directly to your phone. So you never have to go digging through your email. Snag tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On MLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So in this start tonight by Carlos Carrasco, one of the interesting things I saw, the velocity was up. He touched 95 and he averaged 93.5 miles per hour. On this season, that was 1.8 miles per hour up on what he's thrown. And you look at since he came off the IL, the velocity has been up across all of his pitches, but it's been marginal. In this start, it was pretty significant in comparison to the last few. You saw the fastball up. Everything was at least a mile per hour faster, and it was as much as 2.1 miles per hour faster on all of his pitches. So I think that's a sign that Carlos Carrasco feels really good right now. And when he's feeling good and his changeup is as effective as it was tonight and as it was in his last start, where he can get weak contact with it, where he can just make it tough for batters to square that pitch up, and he can work off the fastball, of course, but the fastball and the changeup, he's really effective. In his last 2 starts, 12 and a third, allowed 1 run in each outing, a 1.74 ERA. He's cut his ERA in the season from 8.68 all the way down to 5.74. And if you get that guy, the Mets are in a great position this season because I spent all of yesterday's show on Kodai Senga. I actually followed it up with even more digging on Senga this year, and I wrote up an article for justbaseball.com that you can find if you go to my Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan, or just go to the site. You can find the article I wrote that has some graphic visualization, some highlights and everything that really does kind of illustrate what I was discussing on the show as well, just how Senga has this ghost fork pitch, which honestly, by essentially sorting the field by starting pitchers, looking at plate appearances of at least 50 for a pitch, Senga has the best strikeout weapon of any starting pitcher in baseball right now. So if he can utilize that properly, like we just saw, and he can attack the zone more consistently with the ghost fork, going more cutter fastball, instead of mixing that sweeper in a little over 10% of the time, a pitch that's been hit really hard. If he can focus more on that 3-pitch mix, and I will say, looking at the pitch designations, some of those cutters changed into sliders today. Whatever you want to call it, the sweeper, not a good pitch for him. The cutter slider, the fastball, the changeup, all really good pitches for him. If he has that moving forward, suddenly Senga could be a frontline guy, or at least a really damn good number 3. You hope that Scherzer and Verlander pitch in the back of the baseball cards, and we're going to see Scherzer, I said that weird, Scherzer, get a chance to complete a sweep at 1:10 Eastern time today. By the way, if you want to check out the Mets hometown broadcast, you can do that on Sirius XM with the SXM app. Just search Mets and watch or listen to Scherzer try to lock this down and keep his own good run of success going. Suddenly, a rotation is starting to form here that you trust. I really like Scherzer, Verlander, Senga, Carrasco with the way he's pitched his last 2 times. Tylor Megill is the one guy that I have a little bit of concerns with, yet he's been the most consistent starter this year, to some extent. Him and Senga, I would say. So I feel like the only question right now is, can Carrasco or Megill be a playoff 4-starter? But for the regular season, if they're just giving you a chance to win 2 out of every 3 times, even if that 3rd start's bad, you take that from your back end guys and you can roll for a while. And the other thing is, Jose Quintana is moving along with his rehab. He's set to face batters for the first time since that surgery in March, the rib surgery. And that's going to be, of course, just live batting practice, facing Mets. And then, he could go on rehab, and I'm sure he'll have to make starts. He's going to have to ramp up, and imagine that's going to take time, like a spring training would. But maybe you think about the All-Star break, um, being able to get him back potentially a little before it or after it, and that will give you a little window into what he looks like. And during that time, you're also going to be gauging what you have in David Peterson and in AAA, and of course, still seeing what you're getting from Carrasco and Megill potentially. And hopefully one of those guys kind of steps out to the forefront as a quality number 4 starter, because I don't know what you're going to get on the trade market to fill that. So ideally it's Quintana, but if Carrasco keeps pitching the way he has, I think there's every chance he's your 4 come playoff time. And I think that's okay, because they're in a playoff situation. If you're expecting Carrasco to get you 4 and get through a lineup twice, I think he has the capability to do that and do that well. So I really like how this rotation has started to round into form. Feel so much better about it than I did a month ago. And now moving forward, you just hope they can build on this consistency. But you go out, you finish this series against the Phillies, you win one this weekend against the Blue Jays, and then you have a day off before you face the Braves, and you have a chance to maybe shock them and win a series. And again, you're in a really nice spot, moving forward, if you can pull all that off. And I think the momentum's really going to be there. If the Mets can win these 3 series, even if they drop this last one to the Phillies and then beat the Blue Jays, beat the Braves, you're in a good spot. But honestly, if I'm in that clubhouse with the way the Phillies have showed up the last couple of days offensively, with Scherzer being on the hill, I'd want to put my foot on their throat and get that sweep, send a message that you still own them after you did last year, and carry that momentum into the weekend. But who will be starting these games in left field, Mark Canha or Tommy Pham? I want to discuss their play up to this point this season. We'll do that in a minute. But first, another word from our sponsors. At the start of this season, the Mets got pretty rough production from their left field position, whether it was Mark Canha or Tommy Pham. For Canha, he hit 224 going through April, 310 on base, 365 slug, 675 OPS. Pham, 196 average, 283 on base, 348 slug, 631 OPS. So 2 guys with sub 700 OPSs. That's not great. When you look at the last 30 days, which is essentially looking at the month of May here, these guys have been pretty good. They've actually been 2 of the Mets' best hitters. Surprisingly enough, they each have a better OPS than Nimmo during that span, than Lindor, Marte, Beatty, Jeff McNeil, Daniel Vogelbach, who in the last 30 days hitting 157, 295 on base, 235 slug, a 530 OPS. These guys haven't really been the problem. And I know I did a podcast myself about how the Mets need to cut bait on Tommy Pham, and it's about having too many mouths to feed, right? I still believe that problem can be solved, but I start to look more towards Daniel Vogelbach's direction, because what I see from Tommy Pham and Mark Canha is 2 guys that can play the outfield, not particularly well, but we'll get to that. That pretty good base runners, that draw their walks, that have some pop, can leave the yard at times, that have the capabilities to have big games like the one we saw Pham have a couple days ago, and the one we saw Mark Canha have. These guys are capable and providing an impact. And across the last 30 days, there's 3 guys that have a better OPS than the 2 of them. It's Francisco Alvarez, Eduardo Escobar, Pete Alonso. Then you have Tommy Pham check in at 795 and Mark Canha at 760. Pham's hitting 256, Canha 266. Pham getting on base at a 353 clip. Canha 338, Pham 442 slug, Canha 422. I mean, that line from Pham in particular, 350 on base, nearly a 450 slug. It's actually pretty solid. So look at these 2 players, and I feel like they are both earning their spot on the roster, if nothing else. It's hard to say, yes, you got to DFA Tommy Pham, even though I'll own that I said it as recently as a week ago. because I was frustrated at the playing time. But again, the more I look at some of these things, the more I say, all right, let's say Narvaez is ready to come back and you were to DFA Daniel Vogelback. You're to put Narvaez on the roster and you go 3 catchers. And now Narvaez is your left-handed bat off the bench, and you give sort of free reign to Mark Vientos to have the DH spot, but also understanding that you can get Pham in the lineup at DH at times. You can get Canha in the lineup at DH. You can put a Nimmo or a Marte there. You can use that DH spot to get Pete Alonso off his feet and put Mark Canha at first base or Mark Vientos at first base. You can do a lot of things with that position once you clear Vogelback's at bats from this roster, because in this time where they've gotten decent production from Pham and Canha, Vogelback has, been eaten up at bats, 21 games, 51 plate appearances. You were to, or at bats, and he has 10 walks, so that is 61 plate appearances. You sprinkle that around to a Vientos and, potentially to these guys a little bit, or even just to Vientos, you're getting a better team. But this is more about Pham and Canha. And could you differentiate who should start between the two of them? And I went into this exercise wanting to say after a 4-RBI game that Mark Canha should be the starting left fielder for the Mets. But when I looked at the numbers, they sort of painted a different picture. So you look this year at Tommy Pham. His average exit velocity is 92.6 miles per hour. Mark Canha's is 88.1. Now, last year, very similar. He hit the ball hard. Pham did. Canha didn't necessarily, yet he put up the 127 weighted runs created plus. And again, that's a stat that measures hitters based on a league average of 100. Well, last year, he got on base at a great clip. Of course, he got hit by a million pitches, which helped. But he was able to put up a really good season by just giving you professional at bats. And ultimately, I would say that he is better in that department. Yet, Tommy Pham has cut the strikeouts. Last year, he struck out at a near 27% clip. This year, it's at 20.8. Last year, he walked at a 9% clip. This year, it's over 13. That's 4% better than Mark Canha. Now, Canha's not striking out as much as Pham, but it's a marginal difference. It's 17.3 compared to 20.8 when Pham is walking more. But then you get into some of the stats that go beyond that. Barrel percentage, who barrels at the baseball more? Tommy Pham, 11.4%. Canha is at 4.9%, the same number he put up last year. Go a little bit deeper. Batting average, expected batting average, right? So you look at the expected batting average for Mark Canha this year, he's sitting at 235. For Tommy Pham, it's 278. So Tommy Pham has some underlying numbers, and I understand why they continue to roll him out there. That hitting the ball hard on the ground doesn't mean everything. And I don't look at all these numbers and get too blown away by it. But I do look at an expected slug of 487 for Tommy Pham compared to expected slug of 365 on Mark Canha. I look at the outs above average and see that Canha's -3 outs above average and left, and Tommy Pham's -2. Even though I view Canha as the better outfielder, the numbers haven't really bore that out. The fact that Pham hits the ball hard 44.3% of the time compared to Canha at 38.2 this year. And it's hard to really pick one or the other, especially when over the last 30 days, it's Tommy Pham that's, OPS and close to 800. So I think the bottom line is these are two guys that are proving over this past month that they are MLB caliber players that should be rostered. And as much as I like the idea of a Tim LeCastro, I think I was calling for Luis Cedrola from AAA on that Cut Tommy Pham episode. It's hard for me to think that they'd give better at bats than these guys. Now, you still get into that question of, Buck Showalter and who's going to get the playing time. But ultimately, unless they decide to go the Ronnie Mauricio at second, Jeff McNeil in left field route, I don't necessarily know, which would be the guy to cut. And in that scenario, you probably do have to cut one. And it would still more likely be Pham, I think, based on what Canha probably means to this team as a guy that was there last year. But I also can absolutely see the argument for keeping both and leading towards a more veteran bench. And I think it's more going to matter what happens at DH, which is why I would clear Vogelback and clear a runway for Vientos to prove that he can, take that job. And if not, then maybe you go to Mauricio over Vientos. And whether it's, DHing or being creative with how you use that DH to get everyone their time, I think a lot of opportunities open up. But I keep coming back to the odd man out. The more I look at all of it, I think it's actually Daniel Vogelback. And I think these guys for now should stay because, again, over the past month, they've both been pretty solid MLB vets who are giving you quality at bats, with the upside to win a game for you, like Mark Canha did on Wednesday night. Again, tomorrow or today, as you're listening to this, Thursday, 1:10 Eastern time, Mets versus the Phillies to close out this series. If you want to catch every pitch, Mets hometown broadcast, you can do that with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Just search Mets. For all you everydayers, I'll be back tomorrow recapping this series and previewing what lies ahead. The Mets are set to take on the Toronto Blue Jays and former friend Chris Bassett on Friday night. Make sure you follow, rate, and review where you get your podcast. Follow me on Twitter, Finkelstein Ryan, and follow the show, Locked On Mets.